The distress signal began as a thin whisper, a weak cry drifting through the cold darkness of space. For many years, the Thaleen people had been fighting against the slow death of their home planet. They had watched their blue skies turn pale, their oceans shrink, and their great forests fall silent. Every sunrise reminded them that their world was fading. They were a proud and ancient civilization, known once for their art, their deep knowledge, and their peaceful nature. But none of that mattered now. Their planet Hylia was dying, and nothing they tried could save it. For generations, the Thaleen scientists had warned their leaders that their star was aging faster than expected. It was becoming unstable and sending out bursts of solar radiation that damaged the planet's atmosphere. At first, the damage was small, but as the decades passed, the effects grew worse. The protective layers around the planet began to thin. Harmful radiation reached the surface more often, causing sickness in many Thaleen communities. The oceans warmed faster than any scientist predicted. Coral reefs turned white and died. Fish populations dropped. Rivers dried up. Even the weather changed dramatically. Powerful storms formed out of nowhere, destroying villages and farms. Meanwhile, long droughts made food even harder to grow. The Thaleen people had done everything they could. They created giant shields to protect parts of the atmosphere. They built underground cities to avoid radiation. They tried to slow down the warming oceans with huge cooling machines placed deep underwater. But each solution only bought them a little more time. Every year, the problems grew faster than the solutions. The High Council, the main governing body of the Thaleen, met almost every day to discuss new ideas. But in truth, they were running out of ideas. Many scientists now believed the planet had reached a point where recovery was impossible. The core of the planet was becoming unstable. The atmosphere too weak, the oceans too hot. Thalia was dying from the inside out. The saddest part was that the Thaleen had never been a species that explored far beyond their star system. They valued peace, stability, and home. Their history was filled with stories about harmony with their world, not expansion into the unknown. They had never built war fleets or colonization ships. They had only a few long-range crafts, and they were old and weak. Most of them could not even leave the system. For thousands of years, they had believed they would never need help from anyone. But now, they had no choice. When the High Council gathered for an emergency meeting, there was fear in the room. The council chamber was dimly lit, not because of a design choice, but because the power stations had begun to fail. The people standing in the room could feel the heat rising from the floor, another sign that the planet's core was overheating. The air felt thinner than it had even a year ago. Every Thaleen in the chamber knew what this meant. Time was almost gone. Councillor Sereva, one of the oldest and wisest among them, spoke first. Her voice trembled, not out of fear, but out of sorrow. She had lived through many cycles of their planet's seasons, and she had seen its beauty during her youth. She remembered the golden forests, the warm oceans full of life, and the skies that once glowed with color during sunrise. Now she could barely walk outside without protective gear. "We can no longer pretend," she said softly. "We can no longer tell our people that we have a solution coming. We have to accept the truth. Thalia is dying, and we cannot save it." The room fell silent. Every counselor lowered their head. They all knew she was right. After a long pause, another counselor named Varan spoke. "If we cannot save the world," he said, "perhaps we can save the people. But how?" Someone asked. Varan raised a small device and placed it on the center table. It was old, dusty, and shaped like a small metallic sphere. "We send a signal," he said. "A message to the stars. A call for help." Many in the room gasped. Some stiffened in their seats. The idea of asking other civilizations for help felt strange, almost shameful. The Thaleen were a private species. They rarely communicated with outsiders. They did not even know which civilizations lived beyond their sector of space. Some feared that if a powerful or aggressive species heard their signal, they might come not to help but to conquer. "It is dangerous," Sereva agreed. "But doing nothing is more dangerous." For a long time they debated, fear of the unknown warred with fear of extinction. But in the end, they all agreed they could not let their people die in silence. They needed to try something, anything, that might give them a chance. The next day, the entire planet watched the broadcast. Every city, every settlement, and every remaining skyport tuned in. The message was short but emotional. The High Council spoke of their dying world. They explained the crisis, the suffering, and the shrinking time they had left. At the end, Sereva stepped forward and said the words that would echo through space. "This is our last plea. To anyone who hears us, please help us. We are dying." The signal was sent in every direction, carried by powerful transmitters that used nearly all of the planet's remaining energy. It was sent on multiple frequencies, encoded in over 100 different languages and formats to increase the chance that someone, somewhere, might understand it. When the final pulse of the message left the atmosphere, the Thaleen all felt a strange silence in their hearts. They had done everything they could. Now they could only wait. Days passed, then weeks, then months. At first, many Thaleen remained hopeful. Children asked their parents when the helpers from the stars would arrive. Adults gathered in public squares, staring up at the sky, searching for a flicker of movement. Scientists monitored the listening stations constantly, waiting for any sign of a reply, but nothing came. The situation on the planet grew even worse. The sky began to change color, becoming a strange, pale white. Dust storms swept across the continents. Entire regions became uninhabitable. The Thaleen population, once in the billions, now shrank rapidly as sickness and starvation spread. Every day, evacuation zones changed. People moved from one shelter to another, hoping they could survive just a little longer. Inside the listening station on the northern continent, a small group of technicians worked non-stop. They barely slept, barely ate, and watched the data screens with tired eyes. Though they rarely admitted it out loud, they all shared the same fear. What if no one ever heard their signal? What if they were truly alone in the universe? One night, during a violent electrical storm that made the power lights flicker, a young technician named Lyra sat at her station, fighting sleep. Her console showed the usual emptiness, static waves, background radiation, and a few meaningless signals bounced back from nearby asteroids. She rubbed her eyes, drank another sip of cold tea, and continued scanning. Then something happened. Her console beeped. Just once. A small, soft sound, easily missed. She frowned and leaned closer. The screen showed a faint, unusual pattern, nothing like the usual cosmic noise. A repeating pulse. A structured signal. Her heart began to race. She adjusted the filters, cleared the interference, and listened again. The pulse grew stronger, sharper, more precise. Something or someone was responding. She called the others immediately. Sleepy technicians rushed to her station as the pulse became clearer. The room filled with tension. They analyzed it again and again. It was definitely artificial, and it was not coming from any of their nearby systems. It was coming from far, far away. The message was simpler, confirmation tone, a reply, a promise that they had been heard. Within hours, the High Council was informed. Across the planet, people cried, shouted, prayed, and hugged each other. They did not know who had heard them or what kind of species was responding. But the most important fact was clear. Someone was coming. Someone had listened. For the first time in many years. Hope returned to the Thalian people. They did not know that the species who heard them were known throughout the galaxy by a fearsome name. They did not know that these beings came from a planet considered deadly by almost every other civilization. They did not know that the ones who were coming were called Deathworlders. They only knew that help was on the way, and for a dying world, that was enough to keep them going for one more day. Asterisk, the signal reached humanity in the quiet hours of the night, when most people on the outpost were asleep and only a few officers were awake, monitoring the deep space arrays. The outpost station Helios Ninsat on the very edge of human-controlled territory. It was a lonely place, surrounded by empty stars and frozen asteroids. Most days were dull, filled with maintenance work, routine scans, and long periods of silence. But that silence was broken when the Thaleen distress call arrived. At first, the officers thought it was just another fragment of old data floating in space. Space was full of leftover signals, ancient messages, broken transmissions, strange static. But when the computers decoded part of the message, the officers froze. The signal was definitely not random. It carried structure, urgency, and a kind of emotional weight that no natural phenomenon could create. Asterisk, Lieutenant Mara Torres, a scientist who had been working on Helios 9 for 3 years, leaned closer to her console. Her eyes widened as she watched the message translate piece by piece. She read the words again and again. "We are dying. Please help us." Her hands shook. She called a superior officer immediately. Within minutes, the command room filled with people, officers, engineers, scientists. Even the station commander arrived, half asleep but suddenly wide awake. They replayed the signal, processed it through different systems, and confirmed its origin. A distant star system nearly 14 light-years away, far outside normal travel routes. It took hours for them to decode the rest. When they finally understood the full meaning, the room fell into complete silence. The Thaleen were describing a dying world, a collapsing atmosphere, a civilization on the edge of extinction. Humanity had never encountered the Thaleen before. They were strangers entirely, but their desperation was clear. The station commander took a deep breath and said the words everyone knew were coming. "We need to send this to Earth immediately." The transmission was forwarded through military channels, reaching the United Earth Council headquarters on Lunar Base. Within hours, the message spread across government, science divisions, and military command. Soon, the entire leadership of humanity was gathered in a grand circular chamber overlooking Earth's blue surface. Humanity in this era was known throughout the galaxy by a single powerful name, Deathworlders. The reason was simple. Earth was a dangerous place full of predators, diseases, extreme weather, poisonous environments, and countless survival challenges. Humans evolved in chaos, adapted to hardship, and became stronger because of it. Their bodies healed faster, survived longer, and endured more than most other species. Many civilizations feared them, many avoided them. Some even spread stories that humans were monsters. But fear did not define humanity. Despite their harsh origins, humans were also known for their compassion, courage and stubborn refusal to abandon anyone in need. Even if they were feared, they were also respected. And now, a dying civilization was asking for help. The debate began immediately. Council members stood and spoke one after another. Some argued that they should respond right away. Others warned that answering unknown signals could be dangerous. A few asked difficult questions. What if it's a trap? What if this species is hostile? What if helping them puts humanity at risk? But even as they debated, something was happening on Earth. The message had leaked to the public. Newspapers, feeds, and broadcasts buzzed with one headline: "A civilization is dying, and humanity is the only one who heard them." People across Earth reacted with shock and sadness. Social groups demanded action. Children made drawings of spaceships going to rescue alien families. Religious leaders spoke of compassion. Scientists begged for a chance to study and help a new species. Even soldiers volunteered for what might be the most dangerous mission ever attempted. Humans had many flaws, but indifference was not one of them. After 2 days of discussion, the United Earth Council made their decision. Commander Arik Dane, leader of the Earth Defense and Exploration Fleet, stood before the council and spoke with certainty. "We cannot ignore their call. If they are dying, then we must try to save them. We have the technology, we have the ships, and we have the responsibility." The council agreed. Humanity would send help, not a small mission, not a single ship. They would send a fleet. The Aurelius fleet was the most advanced humanitarian and rescue fleet ever built. It was originally designed for disaster response within human space, planetary evacuations, atmospheric repair missions, and emergency relief. But it had never been used for something like this. Traveling across unknown space to save an entire alien civilization. Preparations began immediately. Thousands of engineers worked day and night to ready the ships. Massive atmospheric stabilizer vessels were loaded with equipment that could rebuild parts of a dying atmosphere. Terraforming labs were filled with machines capable of restoring damaged ecosystems. Medical ships stocked millions of supplies. Dreadnoughts were added to the fleet not for war, but for protection, since no one knew what dangers they might face on the journey. Millions of people on Earth watched the preparations live as crews boarded their ships, wearing sleek dark suits and carrying gear designed for the most extreme environments. Humans knew they were entering unknown territory, but not a single crew member hesitated. To them, the risk didn't matter. What mattered was answering a cry for help. Among those preparing to leave was Dr. Leanne Mercer Azina. She had waited her entire life to meet another intelligent species. When she learned she would be part of the mission, she cried with joy. She believed that saving the Thaleen might change the future of both civilizations. There was also Captain Yolan Cross, a Marine officer known for his calm strength. He had fought in dangerous conflicts before, but this mission felt different. He carried no weapons this time, only protective gear, tools, and a promise that every Thaleen life mattered. Entire families gathered at the launch platforms to bid farewell to their loved ones. Children waved small flags. Friends hugged tightly. Some cried, not from fear, but from pride. Finally, after months of planning and preparation, the Aurelius fleet stood ready in orbit, hundreds of ships shining like silver stars against the darkness of space, from small survey vessels to giant carriers the size of floating cities. The fleet represented the best of humanity. Commander Dane stood before a large viewing screen, watching Earth grow smaller behind him. He placed a hand on the controls and gave the command. "All ships, initiate jump sequence. Set course for the Thaleen homeworld." A deep hum spread through every deck. Energy filled the engines. Lights flickered as space bent around them. Then, in a burst of brilliant blue light, the fleet leapt forward. The journey took weeks. In that time, the humans trained, studied the Thaleen signal again, and prepared for every possible scenario. They still had no idea what the Thaleen looked like, how they lived, or what dangers might exist on their planet. But they were ready for anything as they approached the region of space where the Thaleen system was located. The crew began detecting signs of planetary decradiation spikes, magnetic field disruptions, unstable gravitational waves. The readings shocked even the most experienced scientists. This was worse than anything they had expected. When the Thaleen homestar came into view, the bridge crew grew silent. The star pulsed violently, sending dangerous solar flares into nearby space. The planet itself was visible as a dark, pale sphere wrapped in thin, torn clouds. It looked like a wounded world struggling to breathe. Some crew members swallowed nervously. Others whispered prayers, but none of them backed down. Commander Dane stood tall and gave a simple command: "Begin descent. The Thaleen need us." As the humans moved in closer, they detected thousands of life signs, weak, fading, but still present. Entire cities were collapsing. Oceans were boiling away. The atmosphere was breaking apart in places. The fleet activated shield fields to protect themselves from radiation. Drones flew ahead to map stable landing zones. Medical teams prepared emergency kits. Engineers ran final checks on atmospheric stabilizers. Everyone was ready, but there was one thing the humans did not expect as their ships appeared in the Thaleen sky. Thousands of aliens watched in fear. The Thaleen had always heard frightening stories about Deathworlders, humans said to be fierce, unstoppable, and dangerous. Some Thaleen believed the humans had come to conquer, others feared they would finish what their dying planet started. But when the first human ship touched down, something happened that changed everything. The ramp opened, and instead of warriors, the Thaleen saw humans dressed in rescue gear, carrying medical kits, food supplies, and translation devices. They did not raise weapons. They offered help. The Thaleen leaders stepped forward, frightened but hopeful. When the first human bowed respectfully, the Thaleen gasped. They had expected monsters. Instead, they found kindness. At that moment, the Thaleen understood something powerful. The Deathworlders had come not to harm them, not to rule them, but to save them. For the first time in a long time, the Thaleen felt hope, real hope, spreading through their hearts like warm light. Humanity had answered their call, and their future, once dark and hopeless, now had a new chance to shine. When the human fleet entered the Thaleen sky, the entire planet fell into shock. For weeks the Thaleen had waited, hoping someone would answer their signal. They imagined small rescue ships, gentle envoys, maybe advanced medical vessels. But what appeared in their upper atmosphere was something far beyond anything they could have imagined. Enormous, human starships broke through the clouds, their black and silver hulls glowing under the dying sun. Their engines roared like thunder across the sky. Waves of energy shimmered in the air as atmospheric shields activated, bending the light and sending shadows racing across the ruined landscapes. Some ships were so big that they looked like floating cities. Others were smaller, shaped like sleek wings or massive shields. The Thaleen had never seen anything like it. To them, it looked like an invasion fleet. Families clung to each other. Children cried. Elders shook silently. Even soldiers who still guarded the few remaining cities felt their bodies tense with fear. They had all heard the stories about Deathworlders humans from the wild planet called Earth, a place so dangerous that most other species never dared to approach it. Rumors said humans were nearly impossible to kill, that they fought like beasts, survived anything, and could tear through enemy armies with unstoppable strength. Of course, not all of these rumors were true, but to the Thaleen who had never seen a human before, the arrival of such a massive fleet felt like the arrival of legends, scary, powerful, unpredictable legends. Deep below the trembling sky, Thaleen leader Sarava stood on a crumbling balcony, watching the ships descend. Her robes fluttered in the rising wind. Her heart pounded painfully in her chest. She had been the one to lead the call for help. She had hoped, prayed, and waited for this moment. Yet now, seeing the sheer size of the human fleet, she felt uncertainty filling her mind. Were the humans really coming to help? Or had they misunderstood the message? Had she unintentionally invited the destroyers of her people? She could only hope she was wrong about the stories. The first ship to land was not the largest, but it was clearly the command vessel for the operation. It lowered itself onto a patch of cracked, dry ground outside the Thaleen capital. Dust and debris swirled everywhere as the landing thrusters fired. The sound was deafening. Thaleen soldiers stood in a wide defensive circle, gripping their old projectile weapons even though they knew they would be useless against such advanced technology. When the ship finally touched down, a moment of long silence followed. Everyone waited to see what would come out. Then, with a soft mechanical hiss, the main ramp lowered. Every Thaleen held their breath. Humans emerged, but not in heavy armor, not carrying guns, and not marching like soldiers. They came wearing rescue suits with glowing medical lights, carrying scanners, emergency packs, oxygen filters, and translation devices. Their helmets were transparent, showing their faces clearly. They walked slowly, calmly, hands visible, peaceful. Even from a distance, the Thaleen could see that the humans were not here to fight. Dr. Leanne Mercer stepped forward first. Her black hair was tied neatly behind her helmet visor, and her eyes were gentle but alert. She surveyed the area, immediately noticing the cracks in the ground, the thin air, and the weak oxygen levels. She took a small device from her belt and checked the readings. The readings confirmed what the Thaleen had described. The atmosphere was collapsing rapidly. Captain Yolan Cross stepped out behind her, tall and strong but walking with careful, respectful movements. His role was to protect the humanitarian team, but he kept his hands away from his holstered tools. He wanted the Thaleen to see calmness, not strength. The Thaleen soldiers watched them nervously, unsure what to do. Their commander, a thin and exhausted-looking Thaleen named Vara, took a cautious step forward. His hands shook, not from weakness, but from the pressure of facing a species with such a terrifying reputation. Translator eunuchs hummed to life as both sides activated their language devices. Vara spoke first. His voice cracked up. "Are you the Death?" The humans exchanged glances. The words sounded strange, almost uncomfortable, but they understood where it came from. Dr. Leanne Mercer took a step forward and bowed, slightly a gesture she had practiced after reading about Thaleen customs. "We are humans," she said softly. "We heard your call for help. We came because you need us." The Thaleen soldiers blinked in confusion. They looked at the humans again, trying to find signs of aggression, but the humans were simply standing there, watching them with calm expressions and open hands. No weapons drawn, no threat in their posture, just readiness to help. Sarava finally arrived at the scene, escorted by 2 guards. She walked slowly, her old legs trembling as she approached. When she saw Dr. Lian, she stopped. Her eyes glistened with tears. "Why?" she asked quietly. "You do not know us. You owe us nothing. Why would you come all this way?" The question echoed through the tense air. Commander Dane stepped forward from the human group. He removed his helmet, revealing a tired but kind face. His gray-streaked hair and strong jaw gave him a serious appearance, but his eyes showed warmth. "We came because you asked," he said simply. That was enough. The Thaleen stared at him, confused and overwhelmed. They had always assumed powerful species helped only when something could be gained: material, political, or strategic. But the humans were saying something else entirely. They were saying they came because compassion was enough. A deep, emotional silence settled over the area. For the first time, a small spark of hope flickered in the Thaleen hearts. But that hope was challenged immediately when a sudden tremor shook the ground. Cracks spread like lightning through the dirt. Buildings in the distance swayed dangerously. The humans reacted instantly, faster than the Thaleen had ever seen anyone move. Captain Yolan rushed forward and grabbed Sereva's arm before she could fall. Other humans grabbed Thalian Savines, guiding them away from the collapsing area. Rescue drones shot out of the ship and scanned the ground with bright beams, mapping safe paths. The humans moved with the coordination of a trained rescue force. They were strong, yes, but their priority was saving lives. When the tremor stopped, Sereva looked at the human captain holding her arm. His breathing was steady. His grip was firm but gentle. She tried to speak but could not find the words. The humans had reacted faster than the Thalian soldiers themselves. This was not the behavior of conquerors. This was the behavior of protectors. As the dust settled, Dr. Leanne Mercer approached Sereva again. "Your planet is unstable," she said. "We need to start evacuation procedures. But first, we must build emergency shelters." Sereva nodded slowly. "Our home is falling apart. But if you are truly here to help us, then we welcome you." Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with relief. The humans immediately began setting up camp. They deployed portable atmospheric generators that pushed clean, breathable air into the surrounding area. They assembled medical tents, water purification systems, and structural shields to protect against falling debris. The Thaleen watched in amazement. Machines unfolded like giant silver flowers. Tools hovered in the air using anti-gravity fields. Humans moved with purpose, each one knowing exactly what to do. Some Thaleen children approached carefully, hiding behind their parents. They peered at the humans with wide, curious eyes. A human engineer named Rhea saw them and knelt down, offering a small glowing orb. It was a thermal light ball designed for communication during emergencies. The children gasped as it floated gently above their heads, glowing like a soft blue star. They reached out and touched it, laughing for the first time in months. Their parents watched this interaction with tears in their eyes. Fear slowly began to melt. As the sun sank behind the dying horizon, the humans set up dozens of bright lights around the area, illuminating the darkness that had become normal for the Thaleen. Medical teams treated the sick. Engineers patched failing structures. Atmospheric machines released clouds of oxygen that made breathing easier for everyone. The Thaleen were shocked by how quickly the humans adapted to the harsh environment. They did not struggle with the weak air or the unstable ground. Their bodies seemed to handle the conditions better than any other species could. This was why they were called Deathworlders. They came from a planet that challenged them every day, made them resilient, strong, capable of surviving extremes that would kill others. But the Thaleen also saw something else. Even though the humans were incredibly strong, they used that strength to help, not to intimidate. Later that night, Sereva walked among the human camp, watching them work. Commander Dane joined her and pointed to different machines, explaining what each one did. "These devices will stabilize your air for now," he said. "It's temporary, but it will buy us time." "How long?" Sereva asked quietly. Dane hesitated. "Maybe weeks, maybe months, but not years." Sereva closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the truth. "So our planet cannot be saved." The commander placed a gentle hand on her arm. "We don't know that yet, but even if your world cannot recover, we will not abandon you. We will find a way to save your people." Sereva looked into his eyes and saw sincerity. She had heard many stories of Deathworlders, cold warriors, unstoppable fighters, terrifying creatures. But standing before her was a human who spoke like someone carrying the weight of responsibility for lives not his own. At that moment she realized the truth behind the human's reputation. They were not feared because they were monsters. They were feared because nothing, not danger, not difficulty, not risk could stop them from doing what they believed was right. That was what made them Deathworlders. Not cruelty, but unstoppable resolve. And now, that resolve was focused on saving her people. The Thaleen had asked for help with trembling voices. The Deathworlders had answered with an entire fleet. And for the first time in a long dark age, the Thaleen believed they might live long enough to see a future again. The moment the humans began their work, the Thaleen finally saw what it meant for Deathworlders to race against time. The human fleet spread across the planet like a wave of organized hope. Every ship unloading teams, machines, and supplies with incredible speed. Even though the Thalian world was falling apart, the humans moved as if chaos was normal for them. They had trained for this. They were built for this. And even the planet's dying storms, violent tremors, and poisonous winds were not enough to slow them down. Dr. Leanne Mercer led the scientific teams assigned to stabilize the atmosphere. She stood on a collapsed watchtower, staring at the sky. The clouds were thin, drifting like torn fabric. Strong winds blew dust into the air, making it hard to see. She checked her devices and felt her heart tighten. The planet's protective layers were almost gone. Radiation levels were rising every minute. "We need the atmospheric stabilizers deployed now," she said into her comms. The response came at once. Massive machines taller than buildings were carried down by hover platforms from human carriers. They looked like giant metal spires with rings that rotated slowly. When activated, they created thick protective shields around portions of the sky, holding the atmosphere in place so it wouldn't escape into space. The Thalians stood around the machines, staring in awe as the humans assembled them. Blue energy spread from the stabilizers and formed a dome of stronger air. Thalian children breathed deeply for the first time in months without coughing. But while this helped, it was only temporary. The ground beneath the Thalian capital was unstable. Cracks ran along the streets. Some buildings leaned dangerously. A deep rumbling sound came from under the earth, reminding everyone that the planet was breaking apart from within. Captain Yalan Cross led the engineering teams into the worst-hit areas. They carried scanner drones that could map underground faults. As they walked across the trembling ground, some Thalian medics followed, trying to understand how humans were able to move so quickly despite harsh conditions. A Thalian medic named Solara asked him, "Does this danger not frighten you?" Captain Yalan paused to help a fallen child, lifting broken debris with one hand. His voice was calm. "On Earth, we learn to live with danger. Storms, quakes, wild animals, diseases. Our world tries to kill us every day. Fear is normal. We just don't let it stop us." Solara looked at him with a new understanding. She had always heard fearsome stories about humans, but now she saw the truth. Humans did not run from danger, they learned to face it. While engineering teams worked on structural supports, other humans rushed to the coastal regions where the oceans were boiling. The sight was horrifying. Water levels dropped visibly every hour, leaving behind cracked seabeds and dying sea life. Thick steam rose from the water, making the air unbreathable. Human scientists deployed massive ocean cooling generators. These machines drilled deep into the seabed and released cooling agents, trying to slow the boiling. Even though the ocean could not be saved entirely, humans were determined to keep it stable long enough for more Thalian to survive. Nearby, Thalian fishermen watched with trembling emotions. Their oceans had fed their people for thousands of years. Now, they were watching human strangers from a distant world fight to save what remained. One fisherman approached Dr. Lian, his voice unsteady. "Why do you try so hard? Our world may already be lost." Dr. Lian looked at the boiling sea and then at the man. "Because giving up is not who we are," she said. "Life always deserves a chance, no matter how small." The man wiped tears from his eyes and whispered, "Thank you." But even with all the human effort, disaster struck again. On the third day, the planet experienced one of its worst seismic waves. Entire sections of land split open. Lava burst from cracks, lighting the sky with red fire. The capital city shook violently. Buildings collapsed. People screamed. Human teams immediately rushed into the chaos. Captain Yolan and his marines sprinted toward the falling structures, their bodies pushing through clouds of dust and debris. They carried heavy support beams on their shoulders as if they were nothing. They lifted rubble to reach trapped Thalian. They guided panicked crowds towards safe zones. Sarava, who had been coordinating with Commander Dane, nearly fell when a building fragment crashed near her. A human marine dashed forward, grabbed her, and shielded her with his own body. Debris bounced off the marine's reinforced suit. Sarava had never seen such bravery, and it left her breathless. Everywhere she looked, humans were risking their lives. One group of humans noticed a school building on the verge of collapse. Without hesitation, they rushed in. The roof gave way moments later, but the humans formed a protective barrier with their bodies, sheltering the children underneath. Not a single child was hurt. The Thalian parents who witnessed this cried openly. They had feared Deathworlders for so long, yet here they were protecting their children with their own lives. But the toughest challenge came when scanners detected catastrophic instability beneath the largest remaining Thalian settlement. If the ground collapsed, nearly 100,000 Thalian would die. There was no time. Commander Dane held an emergency meeting with the Thalian High Council. They gathered around holographic maps showing the weak tectonic plates. Sarava asked, "Can you stop it?" Dane hesitated for a moment. "We can delay it, but not prevent it." "And what will it cost?" Sarava asked softly. Dane already knew the answer. "It will cost us people," he said. Human engineers could stabilize the ground temporarily by creating reinforced energy nets deep below the surface. But deploying the nets required a team to go into the unstable underground tunnels. The area was filled with tremors and toxic gases. The chances of survival were extremely low. Humans volunteered instantly. Sarava felt her chest tighten painfully. you would risk your lives for us. A young human engineer replied, your people need time to escape, that's reason enough. The engineering team entered the underground tunnels with heavy suits and drilling equipment. They worked quickly, drilling anchors and expanding energy nets. Every few minutes, powerful tremors knocked them off their feet. Rocks crashed down from above. Toxic fumes filled the air. The temperature rose dangerously high. Still, they kept working. 5 more minutes. One engineer shouted, hold steady. Another answered. Above ground, Thalian families waited nervously, watching the readings on human monitors. Every heartbeat felt like an eternity. Finally, the message came through. Energy nets deployed. Ground stabilized. Start evacuation. Everyone cheered, but the joy ended quickly. As the engineering team tried to return, the tunnels collapsed behind them. The communication link became filled with static. Sareva placed a trembling hand over her mouth as she realized what had happened. Commander Dane closed his eyes in grief. The humans had succeeded, but many of them would not come out alive. Despite the loss, the nets held strong. The Tholian settlement stopped shaking. People were evacuated safely. Tens of thousands of lives were saved because humans had sacrificed themselves. That night, the Thalian built small lanterns and placed them around the human camp. Each lantern represented one of the human engineers who had fallen. When the humans saw the glowing field of lights, they were moved to silence. Some shed tears. Others stood with heads bowed. Sarava walked beside Commander Dane. Your people, she whispered, voice shaking. They gave their lives for us. Commander Dane nodded slowly. We save who we can. That is the promise we make when we choose to help. Sarava swallowed hard, fighting tears. Your people are stronger than we ever imagined. Not in body, but in heart. The days passed, and the rescue continued. Humans deployed more machines, strengthened shelters, delivered medicine, and treated the injured. Even though the planet continued to deteriorate, the Thalian now had time they would have never had without the humans. The Thalian saw Deathworlders not as monsters but as protectors. As the humans worked tirelessly, something else began to grow between the two species: trust, respect, a bond formed not through treaties or agreements, but through shared danger and sacrifice. And as the planet trembled beneath their feet, the Thalian realized something powerful. Even though their world was dying, humanity had given them hope, and that hope was worth more than anything they had lost. The Thalian had always believed their world was unshakable. Their oceans, their glowing forests, their crystal mountains, all of it had lasted for millions of years. But now the planet sounded like a wounded creature, groaning under its own weight. Every day the sky grew dimmer, the winds hotter, the ground more unstable, even with the humans' incredible machines slowing the destruction. Everyone knew the truth. The world was reaching its final days, but the humans refused to stop working. Commander Dane barely slept. His voice echoed through the camps as he directed rescue teams, studied new dangers, and pushed his crew harder than they had ever worked. Dr. Liane continued running from one crisis to another, her clothes always covered in dust, her eyes tired but determined. Marines carried supplies across dangerous terrain while scientists monitored every shift of the Earth. The entire human fleet moved like one giant body, every part working together to keep the Tholian alive. Meanwhile, the Tholian people watched everything with mixed emotions. They felt grateful, but also guilty. Humans were risking everything, and many had already lost their lives underground when stabilizing the failing tectonic plates. The Thalian mourned them deeply, placing lanterns on the hills each night. The glowing lights spread across the land like stars fallen from the sky. Still, the humans kept going. One morning a loud alarm echoed across the main camp. Engineers and Thalian leaders rushed to the command center, where holographic displays flickered with red warnings. The planet's core was becoming unstable faster than anyone predicted. Massive pressure was building under the crust. If the core cracked, the entire planet would explode in less than 2 weeks. A silence fell over the room. Even the humans, who were usually calm, looked tense. Sareva looked at Commander Dane with fear. What does this mean? It means we're out of time, he answered softly. We need to start the full evacuation. The decision broke everyone's hearts. Leaving their home meant leaving their history, their ancestors, their culture, the things that made them who they were. Some Thalian elders cried, others simply stood frozen in shock. But they knew there was no choice. Staying meant death. Human fleet commanders quickly formed a massive evacuation plan. Every human ship would be used. Cargo bays were emptied, living quarters rearranged, medical stations expanded. Even the warships opened space inside to carry civilians. It didn't matter if the journey would be crowded or uncomfortable. Life was more important than comfort. Still, a problem remained. There were millions of Thali. Evacuating them all would be nearly impossible. Commander Dane gathered his officers in the Thalian Council for a serious meeting. Holograms displayed the capacity of each human ship. Even if every vessel was overloaded, they could not transport the entire population in one trip. Dr. Liane spoke first. We can evacuate only 60% of your population before the core collapses. That single sentence felt like a blade cutting through the room. Sareva's voice cracked as she asked, and the rest? Commander Dane looked down. we would not reach them in time. The council reacted with horror. Some shouted, some wept. One elder fell to his knees. Sarava grabbed the edge of the table, breath shaking. Be possible, we must save everyone, she whispered. The humans hated this choice too. You could see it in their faces. But Dane finally said, we will find another way. We always do. And they did. The humans did not accept losing even a single life. They refused to abandon anyone. Engineers worked day and night to quickly construct massive transport platforms, huge floating structures powered by human engines. These platforms were like temporary ships, able to carry thousands at a time. Marines cleared landing zones while scientists programmed new flight paths. Even the injured humans refused to rest. They insisted on helping until the very last moment. But the planet fought back. Large fissures split the ground, swallowing entire forest regions. Firestorms rose from the cracks, burning everything in their path. Air grew thin as the atmosphere weakened again. Dust storms rolled over the land like giant dark waves. Humans and Thalian raced side by side, guiding families to evacuation sites. Some Thalian carried their children while humans carried the elderly. They supported one another as if they had always been one people instead of strangers from different worlds. During the chaos, a young Thalian girl became separated from her parents. She cried out as the ground trembled beneath her feet. A huge chunk of debris began falling toward her. A human marine dashed forward and shielded her with his body. The debris smashed over him, but he held strong, lifting the child into his arms. When her parents found her, they collapsed around the marine, thanking him over and over. Acts like this happened everywhere. Humans risked everything, again and again. Still, the greatest challenge appeared when one of the temporary transport platforms malfunctioned. Its engines failed while thousands of Thalian were aboard. The platform began sinking into a collapsing valley. The screams of terrified families echoed through the air. Commander Dane immediately ordered his ship to descend dangerously low. We're pulling them out, he shouted. His crew protested it was too risky. The ship might crash, but Dane didn't care. Hover ropes were launched. Marines slid down to guide the Thalian up. Some humans even climbed under the failing platform to push it upward with their exosuits, trying to buy time. Dr. Lian monitored the structural integrity. It's giving way. You have 80 seconds. Dane shouted into the comms. Move faster. Nobody gets left. Humans formed chains of support, lifting Thalian children first, then the elderly, then the rest. Even as the platform bent and cracked, humans refused to retreat. One Marine held up a collapsing beam with pure body strength until the last family escaped. Seconds later, the entire platform sank into the earth, swallowed by darkness. The humans barely made it out alive, their bodies bruised and armor cracked. But they didn't lose a single Thalian. When they returned, thousands of Thalian cried and embraced them. Some knelt in gratitude. Others touched the humans' hands, unable to speak through their tears. Hope rose again, but time kept running out. The final evacuation wave had to begin. Human ships fired up their engines. The ground shook violently. Fire erupted from cracks. The sky turned blood red as the planet's core neared its breaking point. The largest crowd of Thalian gathered at the central evacuation site, a vast plain where 30 human ships had landed. It was the only safe area left. Everything around it was collapsing, mountains falling, rivers steaming away, lightning tearing through the clouds. Commander Dane stood on top of a transport vehicle with a megaphone. Move quickly. Stay together. We will get everyone out. Human Marines guided people into ships. Scientists handled medical emergencies. Engineers ran constant diagnostics on ship engines. Every human worked like their life depended on it. Sarava approached Dane with tears in her eyes. This is the end of our world. Dane looked at her with a firm expression. But not the end of your people. She nodded slowly. Because of you, Dane shook his head. Because of all of us, we did this together. As the last waves of evacuees boarded, the ground roared like thunder. A massive shockwave shot across the plains, knocking people off their feet. Pieces of land rose and fell as if the planet was taking its final breath. Dr. Lian screamed through the comms. Core breach is starting. We have minutes, maybe less. The humans immediately began liftoff procedures. Engines rumbled. The air vibrated. One by one, the ships rose from the ground, carrying millions of Thalian aboard. But then a horrible realization hit them. One evacuation ship was missing. It was stationed at a northern cliffside, separated from the main plane. That ship still had over 4,000 Thalian on board, but the collapsing ground had blocked its lift path. Commander Dane stared at the red alert and felt ice in his stomach. If they didn't act immediately, those 4,000 people would die as the planet exploded. He made his decision instantly. Redirect my ship, he ordered. We're going to clear their path. His officers stared at him in shock. Commander, that zone is falling apart. It's suicide. He stepped forward, voice steady. We came here to save a dying civilization. We don't leave 4,000 behind. The humans didn't argue further. They simply nodded and prepared for one final, desperate rescue. Outside, thunder cracked across the sky. The planet tremors grew into violent convulsions, and humanity raced into danger one last time, determined to save every single life they could. even if it cost them their own. The fate of the final ship and the entire Thaleen species now depended on this last mission. Commander Dane's ship shot through the ruined sky as the world beneath him tore itself apart. The clouds glowed red from the heat rising through cracks in the planet's crust. Lightning flashed wildly, not from weather, but from the planet's dying magnetic field. Huge pieces of land floated for a moment before collapsing into fiery pits. Every second felt like a punch to the heart. Time was running out fast. Inside the ship, alarms screamed. The crew held on to their stations as the vessel shook violently. Dr. Lian shouted, structural integrity dropping. Atmospheric pressure unstable. We can't stay long. But Dane didn't slow down. Take us slower. The crew obeyed without hesitation. They trusted their commander, even when following him meant flying straight into danger. Outside, molten rivers of lava spread across the surface, glowing like the cracked veins of a dying giant. Their target came into view. The stranded evacuation ship perched on a half-broken cliff. The cliff was collapsing slowly, sliding toward a massive burning crater. The stranded ship's engines were firing, but the unstable ground made it impossible to lift off. Thousands of Thaleen stood inside, terrified. Their frightened faces stared at the unstable cliff edges. Every vibration made them think it was their final moment. Commander Dane spoke through the comm system. The evacuation ship. This is Commander Dane. We're clearing your launch path to prepare for immediate takeoff. A Thaleen officer replied in a shaking voice. Commander, our path is blocked by collapsing terrain. If you get any closer, you'll fall with us. Dane answered calmly. Let us worry about that. Just stay ready. His ship angled itself above the cliff. Powerful thrusters fired downward, blowing away massive chunks of falling debris. Marines prepared explosive stabilizers, devices meant for emergency construction. They weren't meant to be used like this. But humans adapted their tools to whatever problems stood in their way. Drop the stabilizers. Dane ordered. Marines launched the devices onto the cliffside. They exploded softly, unfolding into wide energy panels that pressed against the cracking ground, slowing the collapse for a few precious minutes. The stranded ship trembled but stayed in place. Dr. Lian checked her readings. The stabilizers won't hold for long. Maybe 3 minutes, maybe less. 3 minutes is enough, Dane replied. He ordered his ship's engines to maximum thrust. The ground below blew apart from the force. But the human ship's downward pressure created a temporary smooth surface, a makeshift launch platform formed from raw power. The Thaleen ship tried again to lift. Engines roared. The cliff cracked deeper. Not enough. The Thaleen captain cried. We're still too heavy. Dane clenched his jaw. Then we push. He turned to his crew. Divert all auxiliary power to external thrusters. Brace yourselves. His ship moved lower, dangerously close to the molten crater. Heat sensors screamed. The metal hull glowed faintly. Any closer and the ship would melt, but Dane pushed. Anyway, the combined force of both ships, struggling to lift, began to shake the air itself. The cliff crumbled. Further, huge pieces of rock fell into the fire below. Thaleen on board screamed. Marines gripped their seats as the human ship shook uncontrollably. And then the cliff collapsed entirely. But instead of falling, the Thaleen ship rose. The humans' external thrusters blasted full power into the underside of the stranded ship, giving it the extra lift needed to break free from gravity. For a moment, both ships shook violently in opposite directions. Engines overloaded. Sparks flew from the human ship's control panels. Smoke filled the cockpit. Dr. Lian shouted warnings. Crew members struggled to stay conscious, but slowly, painfully, the Thaleen ship rose. Then it shot upward like a freed bird. The Thaleen captain cried through the comms, "We are airborne. All passengers safe." A massive cheer erupted inside both ships. Dr. Lian fell back in her seat, breathing hard. We did it. But Dane didn't celebrate yet because his own ship wasn't rising. In fact, it was sinking. The engines were overheating. The extreme heat from the crater below had damaged the lower thrusters. The ship was losing altitude every second. Command, we can't lift off, a pilot whispered. Dane stared at the monitors. Flames licked the edges of the ship through the screens. The ground below glowed brighter as the planet's core cracked open like a burning egg. Dr. Lian looked at him with fear. Dane, if we don't leave now, he cut her off. Divert remaining power to the main thrusters. The ship groaned like a wounded animal. Smoke poured from the rear engines. The crew struggled to stay at their stations as the ship shook violently. Then another voice came through the comms. Commander Dane, this is the second fleet ship. We are moving in to assist. The massive human vessel descended, circling around Dane's ship. It latched energy beams onto the damaged hull. We're pulling you up. The voice shouted. Together. Both ships struggled to rise, but the dying planet was collapsing too fast. A monstrous shockwave of fire burst from the crater, racing toward them like a rising sun. Dane shouted. Full power. The assisting ship poured its last reserves of energy into the beam. Dane's ship fired every remaining thruster, even if it meant burning out the engines completely. The shockwave hit. A wall of fire rose behind them, chasing them upward. The ships climbed faster, engines screaming. The shockwave grew, closer, meters away, feet away, inches, and then they broke through the upper atmosphere. Firestorm burst outward and vanished below them. Ships shot into space like arrows, escaping a bowstring snap. The entire human fleet watched from orbit. As the planet finally reached its limit, bright white light expanded across the planet's surface. Then the world exploded. It wasn't quick. It was a slow blooming of destruction, like a silent flower of fire opening in the darkness of space. Oceans vaporized, mountains disintegrated, clouds turned into glowing vapor. The entire crust shattered, sending fragments drifting away into the void. The Thaline people watched from the safety of the human ships. Many fell to their knees, sobbing. Others clung to their children. Some simply stared, unable to process the loss. Their home was gone. Everything they had ever known. Gone in one terrible moment. Commander Dane's ship drifted into formation with the rest of the fleet. Inside, the crew watched the explosion with quiet grief. They had lost friends, teammates, brave men and women who never returned from the underground missions or the collapsing zones, but their sacrifice had saved an entire species. Later, in the main human flagship, the Thaline Council gathered with the human commanders. The room was quiet. There were no speeches, no official statements. Words felt too small for what had happened. Sereva stepped forward and faced Commander Dane. Her eyes were filled with tears, but also something new, deep respect and gratitude. "You saved us," she whispered. "You saved all who could be saved. We live because of you." Dane shook his head lightly. "We did it together." "No," Sereva said firmly. "Your people gave their lives for us. They fought for us as if we were yours. We will never forget." She reached out and placed her hand over her heart. "All Thaline will carry the memory of humanity. You are no longer strangers. You are family." The other Thaline bowed deeply. Humans bowed back in that moment. Something powerful happened, something greater than treaties, alliances, or politics. A bond formed in the ashes of a fallen world. A bond between Deathworlders and a gentle dying species. A bond sealed through bravery, loss, and hope. And as the fleet set a course to carry the Thaline to a new future, the stars around them shone brighter as if welcoming a civilization reborn. Carried by the strength and compassion of humanity, the Thaline had lost their world, but because of the humans, they had not lost their future.